Good evening. My name is David Trahan. I'm the Executive Director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. We've invited you, and I'm going to let folks introduce themselves here in just a second. We've invited folks on Facebook to learn more about the bill that we're working on to replace the controversial red flag bill being proposed in the legislature. I'll start down at the end with Todd. Would you folks introduce yourself and who you represent?
My name is Todd Tolhurst, and I'm with Gun Owners of Maine.
John Chapman. I'm a life member of SAM. I'm a benefactor level member of the NRA, and I'm a member of the Gun Owners of Maine. I'm their counselor at arms.
Jeff Zimba, knuckle dragging, trigger puller, 30-plus year grassroots activist in the right to keep and bear arms, and proud member of all pro-gun organizations.
I will start by explaining how we got to where we are today. Starting just after the election, I was approached by the governor's office, who had committed to our organization that she would not support a number of gun control measures as well as a red flag bill unless we supported a version of it. The governor had proposed an amendment 2 years ago to a bill that was introduced by Senator Dione, a red flag bill. The amendment that she introduced was to amend the law to allow people in the outpatient progressive treatment program who are a danger to themselves or others to temporarily have their firearms removed. It was a pretty benign amendment, signed off on, or a position of neither for nor against. Using that as a starting point, I was asked whether I would discuss an alternative option or a different bill related to individuals in a mental health crisis. How can we get at those individuals in a way that minimizes impact on them and the public, as well as protect their due process rights? My board said, yes, move forward and begin those discussions. I immediately asked John Chapman to act as our attorney. I wanted to make sure that whatever we did met all the standards of due process and was written in a way that protected gun owners. As that progressed and we looked like we were actually finding something we could do in the protective custody statute, I reached out to Jeff and told him what was going on, that there was some discussions around a separate bill. Eventually I showed him a draft of a skeleton piece of legislation, a starting point. We began discussions further with the National Rifle Association and with Todd and other members of Gun Owners of Maine. The reason that we did this is for those that are watching. The reality is the legislature is now made up of a party that is pushing gun control nationally. Not everyone in the party. There are Democrats who are very conservative on gun issues. That's what's unique about Maine. But there is a group of folks in the legislature, particularly from the urban populated areas in the South, that are pushing a number of gun control measures. For us, the governor made it clear that she would only entertain ideas that had buy-in from a coalition of folks, including the gun rights community. So from that position is how we got started. We now have a bill. We shared it with you on Facebook. There is a reason that it wasn't shared earlier, and that's because it wasn't done and ready to be shared. It had to be drafted. Our friends and coalition supporters had to view it and then weigh in on it. So here we are, we have a bill, and I guess it's a starting point. So if folks have questions, they can ask us questions. I'm going to start, and I would encourage any of you to jump in anytime you want with what the bill does. And I think John can speak to the details and questions that you may have. What this bill did was it eliminated the most, I guess, controversial components of the original bill. There is no red flag order. Under this bill, if it passes, a family member or loved one cannot do a red flag order on you or anybody in the state of Maine. That is gone. There is no search warrant, no simultaneous search warrant, which we believe is unconstitutional. That is gone. There is no ex parte component, meaning they can't do this without your knowledge. They can't do it at all. What it does is, since 1975, I believe, we've had a statute that officers can put you into protective custody if there's probable cause to believe that you're a risk to yourself or others. We're amending that statute, which is completely different than the one that was being proposed in the other bill. What it does is, if you go into protective custody, a police officer believes that you're a danger to yourself or others, can seek the advice of a medical practitioner who may, in consultation with a mental health professional, evaluate that individual. If they determine and sign off and say, yes, this person is in crisis, then the weapons that that individual has, they can lose the right to have those weapons. That's to protect them during that period they're in crisis. Within 14 days, that person is given all the due process that law requires and the Constitution mandates. They have right to counsel. If they can't afford an attorney is appointed by the court to that individual.
By the way, is there any place in the country that has that?
No, not that I know of. That is the highest level of due process that an individual can receive. There are terms that are used during this process. The highest levels or standards for due process are in this bill. Clear and convincing evidence is a good example. The court, when after 14 days, reviews the case and the findings by the medical practitioner, and then the judge makes the final decision if this person is a serious risk to themselves or to others. There's two things that they can do.
By the way, there's just one thing. The guy is going to participate in this hearing and he gets to put in evidence. It isn't like the standard red flag law has the judge with the family members off someplace that this individual has no idea is happening. This is, within the 14 days, you get notice of when and where it's going to be. You get to put on evidence. You get to object to evidence. You get to have a lawyer. If you're too poor to afford a lawyer, they appoint one for you at state expense. And then after that, the judge makes the decision.
Okay, so there's a couple of things the judge can do at that point, and this is all existing law. Most of this bill is already existing law. It's just codified into one process. There's what's called a blue papering process, where you can be committed basically by the court into a hospital for treatment. All of your gun rights gone at that point. You've had your liberty taken away and you're in the hospital. Under this process, it's a new option where the judge can say, based on your condition, what the doctors have said, you're a risk to yourself, we will release you under the condition that you don't have weapons, not firearms. This bill does not speak specifically to firearms. It can be other weapons that an individual could use. That person is in a system, unlike the blue papering process, which can last a lifetime. There's a set window where an individual, the court can suspend those firearm and other weapon rights for up to a year. The individual during that process, during that year, can petition the court. In other words, if they get treatment that they're deemed by their doctor not to be a risk any longer, they can get their weapons back earlier. At the very least, at the end of a year, that order is terminated. And then they have to start all over again, and the court has to then prove by clear and convincing evidence that a person continues to be a risk to themselves or others. That is the only way that this can continue. So with that, that's basically the bill. Most of it has already been in existence for quite some time. A court can, as a condition of release, when an individual comes into the system, require that as a condition of release that a person gives up their weapons, and they can already do that. So this isn't something new. It's really just bringing all of what is currently going on in the system into one streamlined process that I think in the end could actually be better for gun owners and for those who are worried about the loss of their rights. So at this point, is there anyone here that would like to add something to that?
I think an important point here is that over the last few years, the call for red flag laws has grown out of some of the spectacular active shooter events that have happened. And usually these events have been carried out by people who are seriously mentally disturbed. After all, you have to be disturbed in order to carry out these kinds of atrocities. And of course, our opponents on the gun issue have often seen taking guns away from people as the solution to that, whereas, gun rights advocates have repeatedly pointed out that this is in fact a mental health problem and requires a mental health approach. And that's what this bill does. This bill is intended to deal with people who are in mental health crisis, who are really having a problem, who are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and need to be taken into protective custody for a period. And I really don't think that too many gun owners have a serious problem with folks that are in that kind of state, being at least temporarily deprived of the means to harm others or possibly themselves. As you stated, this bill does give some options for them that will allow them to retain their gun rights long-term, as opposed to what the situation is now, which could remove their gun rights from them for life if they actually have that involuntary commitment. This will allow them to short-circuit that and regain those rights when they are in a more stable place.
One of the things that I had skipped over and I missed that's very, very important to this bill is that as an individual comes into the system, if they've been identified as in crisis, the bill calls for the state to link this individual up with the services that they need to get better. That is something that was missing from the other legislation, and the legislation being considered around the country is that missing piece. This idea that the red flag, the original red flag, of going in without somebody's knowledge, they're in crisis because somebody said so. You go in and you take their guns and you close the door behind you and walk away. You've either enraged that individual, you could have irritated their condition, and you might have created a more violent person by doing that. That is not the approach this takes. If an individual ends up in protective custody because of their actions, they are linked up with counsel, given all due process, and linked up with somebody to help them get services to get treatment. That is as compassionate as you can be in a system like this.
And a lot of people have talked about this as, where's the crime component? In going over the alternatives and the numbers with the governor's office, it became pretty clear to us, and those of you that follow the various brain droppings of mine on Gun Owners of Maine have seen, one of the things I did early on is look at our alternatives that we have for dealing with people like this already on the books. And the governor's office looked at that and said, we've already got it sewed up in terms of crimes, in terms of things that people do to other people to harm them, or threaten harm, or recklessly risk harm. That's pretty well already covered. And when you look at the numbers, we had 20 homicides in the last UCR reporting year, and it's Uniform Crime Reports, the FBI keeps them. We had over 270 suicides, and we had over 400 overdoses. So, the governor's office kind of looked at this and agreed with us that we don't have a homicide problem, we have a suicide problem. And that's the real focus of this, is keeping people from killing themselves. Nothing happens about this stuff until they're released. Some people have asked me, well, why don't we just hang on to them if they're that bad? Well, we don't have the beds to hang on to them. Today I was talking to some folks for the National Association of Gun Rights out in Colorado, and I asked them how many beds they had. And it's not many more than we have here in Maine for Colorado. They don't have enough beds at all to handle the number of people that are disturbed, that are wandering around. So the choices there really is no choice of hanging on to all the people that could be a danger to themselves. We just don't have that capacity. We have to get it, we have to let them go because there is no way to hang on to them. And when we do, I don't think we just want them to go out and kill themselves. And that's kind of the thought process behind this.
Okay, if I jump in?
Absolutely.
All right. So, again, my name is Jeff Zemba. I'm the ballistic evangelist for Gun Owners of Maine. And I want to apologize before I get started. I have ocular migraines, and I'm right on the backside of one of those right now. So if my eyes are twitching, doing some crazy things, and I'm having a hard time reading my own notes, I apologize for that because it makes it kind of difficult to see. That being said, when I got involved in this process, I want to make sure we don't gloss over anything in the big picture. But when I got involved in this process, there were a few things that were very clear. And politics is typically, as clear as mud. What I saw in front of us, and I think everybody will agree, is we had an avalanche heading our way, an absolute avalanche. The majority party is not the typical gun-friendly majority party. They own the Blaine House, they own both bodies of the legislature, and there's a pretty wide gap in the number of votes. And we had, was it 11 or 12, really bad gun bills having been introduced. And from hanging around the State House, a lot of attitudes. People were walking around with their chest puffed up and their chin up in the air, as though us, the gun owners, the law-abiding citizens of the state of Maine, are finally going to get ours. This is their time to finally push through these anti-gun bills that we've been working successfully in defeating for 3 decades I've been involved and decades before that. So the feeling had been pretty somber and things weren't looking very good for us. As of now, I mean, are all those bills dead? Where are we on all? I know 6 of them have come out of committee, ought not to pass unanimous, which is a pretty high bar to bring back alive. I don't even know if I've ever seen a unanimous ought not to pass come back to life.
No. Those bills are all dead. There were some divided reports that came out of criminal justice. There's only one that is of a concern, and it isn't even really of a concern any longer. One of the important pieces that people need to understand is everything at the State House is relationships. It's about trust. The people that we engaged with early committed to working on something together, and these other bills would not pass, and that was part of the deal. We committed to coming to the table and trying to come up with something that could be supported from our community. If the individuals in question reneged on that, then that would destroy relationships going forward for decades. And people know that. Everything, we have these rules around the State House, but everything ultimately comes down to trust. And at some point, you have to trust people, and I do. And the people that I've been working with, Senator Kimes, Senator Carpenter, the governor's staff, everyone to the letter has kept their word. That is extremely important. Nobody has done anything than what they said they would do. And what I do is I trust people until I can't trust them anymore. And right now, we're on a good path. Most of the bills are dead. It's at the end of the session, what few are left, I believe, have no support in the Senate.
And these are bad bills. These are bills that are going back to bringing question 3 back with waiting periods on personal firearms transfers. These are bills on establishing a maximum capacity on magazine limits. These are all kinds of terrible bills. They're the regular bills that we've seen numerous times in the past. Bills that with hyperbole in them, you can tell they're coming from one national place. Plastic scary guns that can get through metal detectors. They don't exist. They don't exist. This is the kind of stuff that we're seeing again, but now we're seeing it from opposition with a zeal and the numbers to win if they wanted to pull the carpet out from under us. And what we were facing is, I've seen it referred to as a gun control tsunami. I've been comparing it to an avalanche. I mean, it's an avalanche. We don't have any numbers. And it looks like we're going to be able to stop every single one of these gun bills, including the ridiculous red flag Bloomberg bill that's a cookie cutter piece going all around the nation, just like everything else they do. There's nothing unique to any of these bills. There's nothing Maine-based to any of these bills. There's no problem here in the state of Maine that needs their solution. Nothing at all. And we're going to be able to kill every single one of those bills. And for icing on the cake is this new bill that is absolutely going to take the teeth out of Bloomberg's interest in perverting our citizens initiative system again to come back with a referendum question, just like they did on question 3. That's going to cost thousands of hours. It's going to cost millions of dollars that we don't have. And now, by calling their bluff, we've got the opportunity to stop that in its tracks, because their claim is They're concerned about people in crisis, the mental health of somebody here in the state of Maine. But what they've done is disguised another gun control bill, a bad grab, a zero due process bad grab. Somebody knocks on your door and you say hello, and they say, we're here to take your guns. That doesn't sound like you're very compassionate and concerned about people that are legitimately in crisis. That sounds to me, and everybody that I've spoken with, including every law enforcement officer I've had a conversation with, that's not very caring about the person. That's going to escalate and start something that probably there will be no going back on. So that little due process thing is pretty important to all of us. And what we've done is, again, call Bloomberg's bluff. So they claim to be concerned for people in crisis. We're addressing our people in crisis. We're addressing it with laws that already exist in the state of Maine, and we're overemphasizing the due process and not only allowing participation by the person that they weren't even going to give the courtesy of a phone call to, just have somebody show up and take their guns, but actually providing their assistance through the legal system. John, is that something you can talk about a little bit? What this will provide over and above what we already have to help somebody that may be in crisis that's being brought into this system?
Well, having the right to counsel, and I mean by that appointed counsel, if you can't afford it, is gigantic, because not everyone has legal education. There's a lot of people I deal with that I would trust with my life in terms of anything to do with electricity, natural gas, and so forth, which I would blow myself up with very promptly. But they don't know what I know about the law, and they're really lost if they get in the system.
I don't speak your language.
Well, you're getting better at it, but that may be bad. But appointed counsel is huge, because they will give you some ideas about, because there's real rules of evidence here. They may find that they can keep all the bad stuff out even. You have the Fifth Amendment rights in this. You have the right not to incriminate yourself. There's a lot of rights you have here and one of the things you went back and forth on is the 14 days. One of the alternatives to this that we know is pretty much constitutional is if you wouldn't agree to having all of your dangerous weapons grabbed, then they'd just keep you in. And in preparing for a hearing like this, we sort of discussed, are you able to help yourself better if you're in a mental institution or able to go to your doctor, your lawyer, your family members, access your documents at home and your home computer to defend yourself? I think the answer is pretty obvious. If you're in a mental hospital communicating with everybody, the visits and the peak hole of the internet, you're not going to do as well at that hearing when it comes up. And you're going to need probably 3 times as long as that 14 days to really prepare a defense. Could it be quicker? Yeah, but I try cases. A lot of people out there that are listening to this probably have been involved in cases. And a lot of times you aren't ready to go the next day because you've got to serve subpoenas on people. One of the things you want, and I've used this in hearings like this, there may be people you want to appear and provide evidence that supports your case. Well, if you don't have time and distance to serve them with a subpoena to make them come, you won't be able to do that, and you'll lose that hearing. 14 days is probably about the time frame that you would need to prepare a decent case in a situation like this. And there's a case that's decided by the federal courts in our circuit after Heller, after McDonald, that deals exactly with this kind of situation. And it says, you know, a temporary deprivation is probably, we aren't going to tell you that that's bad. So we've already kind of got the First Circuit weighing in, saying that this kind of thing is that it works, that it's okay constitutionally, and that the U.S. versus Raylander, and it's also exactly what we do in the case of criminal stuff. I mean, if you're arrested by an officer, you don't get a judge's hearing before you get the conditions of bail. You go before a bail commissioner, and he just kind of looks at a cheat sheet You don't get to put in all kinds of evidence. And he says, okay, this is your deal. This is how much you're going to put up, and these are going to be your conditions of release. It's actually a little bit less than you'd get with this. And probably because there's probably a little more danger if you're dealing with somebody that's committed a real crime.
Oh, thank you. The thing that I keep hearing that's really important, there are a couple things I keep hearing that are really important. One is we need to respect due process, and that is of the utmost importance. The red flag bill that is going to go down in flames not only had no due process in it. Again, you got a surprise, a knock on the door, give us your guns. No due process, but it was going to, this is the part that was concerning a lot of the law enforcement people that I spoke to. It was actually going to put them in a position where they had to serve a warrant for a non-criminal matter. No one had been arrested. No one had been accused of committing a crime. No one had committed a crime. So they were actually going to be forced with serving a warrant in a civil capacity. No crime being committed, no evidence that a crime is going to be committed. That's a big problem. I can't believe this thing has passed in other states, and I have confidence that it's going to be viewed as not constitutional. Now, all of the police officers that I spoke with, and again, I don't speak to the political police officers. I talk to the people that are on the road, people that execute these type of things, not order other people to do these things. And I've been told unanimously, nobody was going to serve one of these warrants. They would all be considered high risk because the person is, according to this, in crisis, and it's a civil case, and they're armed and they're being sent to take their guns. So it wasn't going to happen. What was going to happen is it wouldn't be your local police officer that would swing in and say, hey, Joe, how you doing? Are you feeling okay? It was going to be the SWAT team, and things were going to get really bad. Now, due process, obviously, of the utmost importance. This not only encourages due process, but almost forces more interaction, due process with whoever it is that may be in crisis. So that one has completely gone out the window. At least that's how it's been explained to me numerous times, and I don't have any concerns about that anymore because that's what we want. People to interact, not ex parte hearings and not the loss of due process. And compromise is the second thing I keep hearing. We don't want to compromise. We can't compromise. You bet your rear end we can't compromise. Compromise means something entirely different to the real world, to all of us in the United States than it does to the gun grabbers, to the people that are trying to take our guns away. To you and I, to logical people, compromise is a little bit of give and a little bit of take on both sides till you find something that suits everybody, and that's compromise. To the anti-gun organizations, compromise means we want to take all your stuff. And we say, no, you can't have any of it. And the compromise is, well, we'll only take half. That's how they do business. So we absolutely do not compromise. With these bills that have come forth in the state of Maine, every single thing that I've read, and like Dave said, actions speak louder than words. All of the actions that I've seen, there is no compromise. There is no, on any of them, not just the red flag thing, there's no compromise whatsoever. There's no amendment to the original red flag bill, so there won't be any red flag, anything supported by anyone in our community. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's going to go down in flames, and we're gonna, for the icing on top, after killing all of those bills, be able to take the teeth out of Plan B for Bloomberg, come back and cost us all millions of dollars defending ourselves as they flood our airwaves with their propaganda funded by Bloomberg. So everything that I've read looks fantastic. All of the laws that are moving forward appear to be existing law, and it kind of sets guidelines to help our law enforcement people, our mental health professionals deal with a person, somebody in crisis. Not go take guns, help that person. And I think we're knocking it out of the park. If we kill every single anti-gun bill, including red flag, and stop it from coming forward again in some perversion of our citizens' initiative system, it's knocked out of the park.
Yeah, John, I think that's a really important point. I mean, who would have thought coming into this session with those 24 or so anti-gun bills piled on top of each other, that we would be sitting here now today on the cusp of defeating each and every one of them.
Everyone.
It's incomprehensible that this was able to be done.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on something else. I mean, I think all of us have heard, and I have certainly heard from a great many in our community concerned about whether this is some kind of a compromise
Right.
on LD 1312, on the red flag bill that was put forward by basically out-of-state forces. This is a cookie-cutter Bloomberg bill.
Identical language.
In a dozen different states. And, there's a lot of concern that I completely get.
Yeah.
We're somehow giving away something here. And, it just isn't true. This is no longer a red flag bill. It has no common DNA with it at all. This is a bill that is directed towards what we, as the gun rights community, have said all along, that what we have is a mental health problem that needs addressing. This does give people help when they're in crisis, and it does have gatekeepers. No longer do you have the people who may have bad blood, the ex-spouse or the ex-girlfriend or the disaffected children who may wish to harass or get revenge on the subject.
Or get the guns themselves.
Yeah.
And I've seen that expanded upon just in the last couple days. In another state, they're adding layers of people who can call to make these complaints that will get the SWAT team to show up in the middle of the night unannounced. So it's not like everything they do, it's never limited to what it starts out as. It only rolls and gets worse as you go.
Nor do you have the overworked judge who's simply going to grant these things without a second thought because better safe than sorry. Instead, you're going to have to come to the attention of law enforcement because you're being cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. They're going to have to determine that you look crazy and need to be looked at by a doctor. An independent, disinterested doc is going to look you over and determine whether or not you have a problem that needs addressing, and that problem is made worse by your access to dangerous weapons, not necessarily firearms. And then, yes, you may lose those firearms for a while you are in this agitated and dangerous state, when you may go out and do something bad.
Just like right now, just like what already
And this
happened.
is not a maybe, a future crime kind of thing like under a red flag bill. This is where, you've been evaluated, and any one of us would see that, the subject is not in a fit state to have access to dangerous weapons. But further, I think that the real acid test of whether or not this thing is a red flag bill is the total and absolute meltdown that the Bloomberg people, that everybody on the other side of this issue is having right now. They are losing their minds that this is happening. They don't like it. And they don't like it because it's not an anti-gun bill. It is precisely what they don't want. It is a bill that gets to the root of the problem, and they don't want to fix problems. Problems are their bread and butter. So this is not what they want. This is what we want.
And that's a good indication of the work that we're doing, that they're irritated and angry. Go ahead.
Well, I do want to talk to the mental health component for a moment. There is a concern that people with mental health might be stereotyped or tarnished in some way under this process. I would remind you that people with mental illness are already affected by a process very similar to this called the blue papering process. That process means if you get into a crisis like this and you're brought into state care, a judge can put you in a hospital against your will. So that already exists. The intentions here were not to, and I started this thing with the governor's office, was not to target individuals with mental illness. It was to get at what we all saw nationally, and we heard in our local barbershops and the gas stations, is this is a mental health issue. These people have shown by their actions in the past before these shootings that they had mental health issues. Instead of just picking sides and battling and maybe losing a lot, I decided, and my board did, that it might be better to engage in a discussion on what we might be able to do to improve the system. We didn't come up with a new system. We improved what was already in place in a way to get at the root cause. This, for me, is extremely important for the people listening. The community that I and Jeff and others represent are the people that take time out without pay, with no compensation, to learn to be firearm instructors. I bet I have 1,000 people in my organization that have been trained to be instructors. They are the people who care about firearm safety. They're training our kids and the new generations of shooters, and they commit to this without any recognition, without being rewarded for it. They do it because it's the right thing to do. Hunters agreed to a mandatory 4-day hunter safety course before they can go hunting. Our community is about safety. It's about safe communities, reducing crime. I don't like the idea of other organizations have nothing to do with guns, do not understand them, coming in and saying, we're going to tell you how to be safe with firearms, because we've been doing that for generations. And we should not let these organizations take that from us. And I think we should be proud of it. And in a sense, when we do nothing, we're vulnerable to those criticisms.
That's a really good point. This is a big problem, and when we're dealing with people like our opposition, like we usually deal with, we have to be skeptical, and we have to ask questions, and we have to check. We need an attorney to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, because that's a huge one. How many times have we heard in a veiled threat, maybe in an awkward moment of truth on their side, they actually tell us how they feel. And they think nobody should be able to own guns. That's when the truth comes out and they explain, yeah, we want to take your stuff and we want to do this and this and this. Once in a while they mess up and they tell the truth. So why wouldn't they use this as a workaround, somebody with PTSD or anything that is a minor temporary issue, and escalate it so we all lose our gun rights? Well, that was a concern of mine and of all of ours moving in. And looking at this, there are several levels of insulation to make sure that only people that are legitimately in crisis, and this is a super rare thing, even especially in the state of Maine. But there are several layers of insulation to make sure only people that should be receiving help are brought in through this system. Again, our regular blue paper system, it's helping set these guidelines to make certain the right people are in. And when I see language in here like they have to provide, the law enforcement officer and the crisis worker that are evaluating this person have to show clear and convincing evidence. Those are pretty serious legal terms. And unlike what we see on the national news, words actually mean things. And these words are important. Clear and convincing evidence that someone will pose a likelihood to serious injury or harm. That's huge. And that's not somebody getting jacked up because someone else was offended by a post on social media. So this isn't a workaround like that either. Although that wasn't even necessary with the original bill. So here we are. And that brings me to one other point. I'll stop babbling. This isn't just a cherry on top to stop Bloomberg from moving forward next November. This isn't just stopping every single anti-gun bill that a lot of people thought we were going to have shoved down our throats, cold in their tracks. This is actually going to add some enhancements to the recognition of our rights that a lot of people haven't even thought about. For instance, when somebody is in crisis, that's not always a lifetime or lifelong ailment. That could be somebody that is on medication, that their medication has gotten messed up by a doctor, or they're taking the wrong dosage, or whatever it is. Sometimes people that are in crisis get better. And the way things are today, they're stuck with this branding. Once they've been brought into protective custody to this blue paper system, they may be stuck with the consequences of that for the rest of their lives. And that causes a problem because a lot of people that should have help for something that's minor won't seek out help because they're afraid of getting jacked up and caught in this lifetime problem, revolving door problem they can't get out of. So this proposal actually looks into people that have been brought into the system, that were in crisis, that no longer are in crisis, that it's been ruled and proven by clear and convincing evidence that they are not having any problems anymore, yet they can't continue enjoying the rights that they were born with, that they were afforded. With this piece of paper, or with this proposal, they can get these rights recognized again and be taken off from these lists that prevent them from doing things. And that's a whole forgotten segment of us, people that have been in crisis and have gotten better. Sorry, you were in crisis once, so your rights are gone. Not anymore. There's a certain number of days, John, do you recall that? Before information would be transmitted, say, to NICS, to allow somebody the ability to exercise their right to self-preservation after they're no longer in crisis? Because this is something brand new. This is going to help people that are not getting this help today. Did I catch you with a?
Yeah, this bill does require, once these restrictions are lifted from an individual, for that information to be communicated to both the main identification. SBI, State Bureau of Identification, and to the federal NICS.
Right.
Very promptly.
Right.
Prior to this, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're caught in the system, oh well, you're stuck in the system. This even addresses that, gets people that have been caught in the system and have healed and are no longer in crisis out of that quagmire that nobody's been able to help them with in the past. So this goes even further than that.
Todd, we have some folks that I kind of promised could ask questions. Do you have any questions?
We've actually touched on a few of the comments that people have been posting, like for instance, whether or not this is a compromise and still a red flag bill. But certainly if people have specific questions, things that you want to know about this bill, please do place a comment on the live feed here, and we'll answer those as they come up. Right now, I don't see any outstanding.
There will be no compromise on my watch. There hasn't been for 3 decades, and there won't be moving forward. And I mean compromise in every sense of the word, including its real definition and the one that we're faced with all the time. We don't need to compromise. The red flag bill is going to be gone. Bloomberg's going to be stopped in his tracks moving forward.
Can I just real quick, I want to speak to the compromise piece because as the people listening know, we cannot control the press. When this was first discussed, one of the conditions that I had to participate was that there would be open. Would not be amending 1312. But what happens is because this thing was so complicated and involves so many people, it took a period of time to develop. During that process, like at the State House on everything, it gets leaked out that something's going on. And then the next thing you know, the Bangor Daily News reports that there's a compromise to LD 1312.
No.
There was never a compromise, but I can't control that. And I had asked the people, the press involved, to not frame it that way, but they did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming out in the news now, because people, when they normally look at the legislative process and they see where you start a debate and where you end, they just assume that you're compromising on that legislation. That was never the process, and it's not the process today. I have been involved in politics for over 20 years, of which 12 years I served in the legislature. The people in this room know it. I never once supported gun control. I never compromised on it, and I never will. So I don't see this, and I know there's some people that like to attack because for their own reasons, they may not want something to pass. And I understand that and respect that. But don't use the terms being put out there by other people that we can't control. And the press we can. All I can do, and one of the reasons we're having this Facebook interaction today, is to try to educate the people that follow us, that care about this. This is, I think, fairly unique to be doing something like this.
Well, let's just have a public discussion so everybody can talk about it and ask questions, and we can all learn together at the same time and not believe the foolishness that the mainstream media that doesn't know what this is about dictate the narrative.
I do have a couple of people asking a pretty similar question. Joey and Danny are both asking if this will be a new bill separate from 1312, or how likely is it that this proposal will substitute for 1312?
Yeah, a couple good questions. The new bill is being submitted by Senator Kine and Representative, I should say Senator Carpenter, bipartisan introduction of a completely new bill. The bill's title is, and its LR number is, and I don't have my glasses.
An act
LRR,
to enhance personal and public safety by requiring evaluations of and judicial hearings for persons in protective custody regarding risk of harm and restricting access to dangerous weapons.
and it's,
It's LR 2536.
yeah, so it is a completely new bill. It has been gaining support within the legislature in a bipartisan fashion, as well as organizations that have been weighing in. I was on a MPBN debate on this whole red flag issue and this alternative. And I could not control some of the things that were being said and done. I do want to clear something up. The organizations that got the gun control advocates during that show accused me of doing a backroom deal. They also said that they had never seen the legislation, didn't know what was in it. That was not true. They had had that amendment in their hands for 3.5 weeks. Ironically, some of the language that's in here ended up as a proposed amendment to 1312. I ask you, how could they, with a straight face, say they had never seen it, but at the same time extracted language from this to submit in their bill? That's what we're dealing with here, and I hope that the people watching understand that on the other side, for those who don't want this, the only way that they can scuttle this now is to break up the relationships that have been built over the last several months to move this forward. I believe that as long as people are honoring their words, this bill will be adopted by the legislature and it will become law. There are some very smart people. 2 ex-attorney generals helped draft this. The ex-president of the Maine Community College system and a very good lawyer. One of the best lawyers in Maine sitting next to me. And the people in this room, lawyers from the National Rifle Association weighed in on this. I don't think you could have any better people at the table having put this thing together. It is very hard for me to hear the criticisms and see them on social media, but I would tell you that a lot of it has been generated by fear.
And lies.
And lack of information and lies.
And lies.
And we can't deal with that. All we can do is ask you to trust us that we brought the best people to the table to do this. And in the end, I think if things go the way we've described them, our community will be whole at the end of the day.
Yeah. And if people are concerned, leery, cautious, untrusting, weary of anything going on, good, you absolutely should be, because that means that you're paying attention. And there's a lot of lies that are circulating. There's a lot of guessing that's going on with people claiming that that's probably what's happening. There's a lot of seeds of distrust that are being sown. And I can tell you straight up, every portion that I've been involved in, every conversation I've overheard, every single line on every page that I've read has no compromise whatsoever. Due process is not only back to be front and center, but it's guaranteed, it's encouraged, and it's actually paid for. Defense is actually paid for. Not don't just have the right to it, it will be provided. This thing that I've read, and again, every conversation that I've had with everybody shows that the bar is set so high, the insulation factor so deep, to make sure that none of us that shouldn't get jacked up into this system don't, that it looks fantastic to me. It kills every anti-gun bill in the legislature, and we stand a pretty good chance of Plan B not going to our citizens initiative again. And the beauty is the majority of it, or all of it in some capacity, is current law. It's what we already have. It's something that was put together by Maine people for Maine issues that we have in the state of Maine. Not garbage from New York City or Washington, D.C. that was thrust upon us in a cookie cutter fashion to solve problems that we don't have. Solutions for issues that we don't have. This is from Maine, for Maine, with Maine people in mind, with all of the concerns. We all have all of the same concerns.
I do have another question from Alex, who I think that's a good question. He wants to know if this bill gives the government the authority to round people up and put them into mental hospitals.
I'd like to address that. The standards for taking somebody into protective custody aren't changed at all. The protective custody law and standards before that are unchanged.
From the 1970s.
Yeah, this is a pretty old law, and those standards are unchanged. So if they could, tomorrow, if they were to pass the bill tomorrow, the standard would be no different than it is today, or last year, or the year before. So no, it doesn't. And not only that, the probable cause standard is what applies in both cases. And if somebody, well, anybody that pays attention to federal court cases knows that if you grab somebody without probable cause, that person that's doing the grabbing can end up being sued and sometimes get a lot of money. And guess what? If they successfully sue, their attorney's fees get paid too. And that is near and dear to my heart.
That's a great question, because we touched on it before. Maybe you didn't catch that part earlier. But making sure that nobody, thank you, is jacked up in this system that shouldn't be part of this system is of the utmost importance here. This doesn't allow anything to be permitted or perverted or misutilized or anything to even change over what's already permissible and has been since 1975, I guess. So no, that's a very big concern, to make sure that people are not only not rounded up, but not brought into the system at all.
And when you take a look at the actual law itself, it starts out with section 3862A. Well, when you look at 3862, that's Maine's existing protective custody law. And then this jumps off from, okay, now that you're in protective custody, what the hell are we going to do with you? So how you get there is no different. What happens to you is a lot more organized and gives you more rights and direction. I'll tell you, there's one thing that's missing, and it's interesting when you look at all the true red flag laws that come out of all the benighted places around the country, and all of them talk about firearms. This talks about dangerous weapons, which is broader than firearms, a lot of things that aren't guns. And we had actually kind of made a pitch, because we get a lot of suicides and accidental overdoses, and those that we can't really tell which is which, from narcotics, from fentanyl in particular, and carfentanil. And we had actually talked to the governor's office about saying, wait, we know this isn't a firearms problem specifically. Some of you may question, well, why aren't we going after somebody's booze and pills? Because there's a lot of deaths from that. And the answer is, well, we were told, because we aren't the only people they talked to, they were talking to law enforcement a lot. And they said, well, okay, we can grab guns and we can grab dangerous weapons. How far down do you want us to go? We've got a space to store all this stuff. Are we going to grab all the rope? Are we going to grab every little 1 pound propane canister? I mean, at some point it becomes unwieldy. You know, we've thought about narcotics, we've thought about alcohol, drugs of abuse, but I suppose if they came across them and they were illegal drugs, that might be grabbed too. I suppose there's another concern, and I hadn't even thought about it till now. If they're legal drugs, those people might need that stuff when they get out.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why having the judge and the medical professionals involved make those decisions. This isn't being done in a kangaroo court. Right now in Maine, when you get into the mandatory outpatient treatment program, and that is for people with chronic mental illness who may be a risk to themselves, those folks have been in the system a long time, and they're under the care of physicians. They have been, in some cases, for their whole lives. They're people that our society should be compassionate with and try its best to provide the services they need to get better. This other process of red flag is alarming to me in so many different ways. Oftentimes I get goosebumps when I think about it. When you imagine a country, when you expand a red flag, which is to come get guns, to any other thing that you own, your car, other devices in your home, where somebody can just come in and say, he's a scary person, and they come in and they take your stuff without any due process. What do we have left as a country?
You're legally scary.
that you're legally scary. And that's the place that some of these states are going. There's an individual from Maryland, his name was Gary Willis, he was 62 years old. Maryland's red flag law was in existence for less than a year. A relative of his did a red flag order against him, and at 5:17 in the morning, the police showed up at his door. Like many of us, at 5 o'clock in the morning, when somebody's banging on your door, he armed himself and went to his door. When he opened it up, there were two police officers, and they said, put the gun down, which he did. They then served a red flag order on him. Now remember, he was not accused of a crime. There was no crime, even a whisper of a crime. Yet they came into his home. When they went to serve him the red flag order, he picked his gun back up. There was a struggle that ensued, and he was shot to death in his own home. That was covered over. It was whitewashed. Nobody talks about it anymore. It's a black eye for the red flag people. That law has already killed somebody. Yet the claims that they're saving lives cannot be backed up. They can doctor the numbers all they want, but suicides have not declined in the states that they reference. What has happened is suicides by gun have gone down slightly, but suicides as a whole have maintained or increased. They're just killing themselves in other ways.
By the way, anybody that wants this, David and I have been working on the stats for that, and Connecticut, for example, increased more than the national average for suicides during the time frame you look at. Indiana, by their own admission, has gone through the roof in both homicide and suicide. Nice job.
Unbelievable. Our community always has the facts. We always have the truth. We always have the statistics on our side. All the other side has is hyperbole and scare tactics and propaganda. And once you break through that, it's very, very clear to see why a state like the state of Maine, one of the heaviest armed states per capita in the nation, also coincides as one of the safest states. I think we're the safest state, aren't we, as far as violent crime on the last one?
Yes, we have the lowest violent crime rate in the nation.
Right. There's no correlation between gun ownership and violent crime, except it could be very positive because the places with high firearms ownership rates, like Maine, enjoy very, very low violent crime. One of the bills that this is going to help defeat would have made it illegal for us to make our own firearms here in the state of Maine, to make our own guns. They painted a picture when they presented the bill as though there was some crisis, that Pandora's box just opened, and my goodness, just anybody can make a gun, and you don't need a background check, and you don't need any permission, and there's no criteria as to how you have to market. And I'm thinking to myself, there was a fella in the late 1800s named Hiram Maxim, and he would go on later to be Sir Hiram Maxim, who he made a few guns on his own too, without special permission, without special forms, without any marketing criteria, and as well as inventing, having a patent for the incandescent light, and flying machines, man flight. He also invented the machine gun. So we've got a pretty long history of making our own guns here in the state of Maine. And I think it goes back just a little bit further than this legislative session. And probably if there was going to be a problem with it, we might have heard about it before this year. So this is great. I mean, everything I've seen, every conversation I've had, we've defeated every anti-gun bill, every single one brought forward, and it's all of the regulars with a limited magazine capacity, would have banned assault weapons that don't exist, would have made homemade guns illegal, would have effectively shut down gun shows, and and including Bloomberg's cookie cutter red flag bill, all gone, all dead. And now we have, through this, by reforming current Maine law, using Maine logic and Maine people to take care of legitimate Maine people in crisis, we can take the teeth out of anything moving forward. So, I mean, I see this session as an absolute grand slam, and I wouldn't have thought we would be in a position, 8 months ago, that we could say, given the makeup of the body in the legislature, that we could beat all of these gun bills. Every single one of them is going to be gone. I'm just beside myself at that so far.
And to that point, Jeff, this is important. Maine is unique as it relates to the rest of the nation. Whatever political party you're from, and I come from a family of Democrats. I call them old school Democrats. Many rural blue dog Democrats do not buy into this stuff. And we need to recognize that when we fall into the strategy of folks to divide us
Yeah, absolutely.
and call names to one party, and while taking the high ground and saying this party is the true defenders of our gun rights. That isn't the reality here in Maine. It's unique.
Right.
When people do the right thing for us, we need to say so, say thank you. There are very good legislators in both parties. To this point, whatever your thoughts are about the social policies of our governor, she has been steadfast and supported us. She has supported the outdoor community, and she's made it clear publicly in the press on background checks and these other issues that she wants people to collaborate and work together. And we need to recognize that and say thank you when it's appropriate.
People aren't wrong, though, to be concerned
Oh,
about
absolutely
where
not.
this party's going, because if you look at the national
Absolutely.
platform, they wear their being anti-gun and anti-freedom and anti-individual rights as a badge of honor. Maine is, like Dave said, super unique, very unique in the fact that firearms issues are a completely bipartisan thing here in the state of Maine. And some of this may be a surprise to some people, but some of our strongest protections in recognizing our rights to firearms happened during administrations that were controlled by the Democrats. We have a lot of rural area here in the state of Maine, and I think that's the biggest divide, urban versus rural, across the nation. I don't think it's so easy as some of the wedges people like to drive. I think you've got urban versus rural outlook way of looking at things, being self-sufficient and trusting one another. And regardless of political party, we have a lot of rural people and a lot of rural area here in the state of Maine. And if it were true that one political party would want to tank our rights, they'd have been tanked long ago, because they've actually been in control far more than the other party has. And here we are still improving upon those rights, the recognition of those rights, when a lot of other states and other places are losing things left and right. We're actually gaining. We've gained some this year. Our range protection has gone up. Again, we've gained in several areas. And you can't do that with one party by any stretch of the imagination. That's a good point.
That's right. To a little bit of levity here. I came from a family of Democrats, but I was the lone wolf Republican. I just wanted to make that clear to folks.
I'm just the reverse. I came from a family of Republicans. I'm the only Democrat, and I drive a Prius.
Oh, ooh, I want to move down.
Todd, is there any more feedback? I'd love to talk to people about these things so we can answer every question and not let the media have that.
I'm not seeing any outstanding questions that we haven't already answered, no.
Okay.
Last call
All right.
on questions, I think.
I do want to bring up a point. I've heard, and before I bring up any point, thank you. Thank to every single grassroots individual, every single patriot that has taken time to write letters and make phone calls and show up at the State House and prepare testimony, submit it, to read it, to educate other people, to share our facts, and to educate people with what we really have that we're up against. I've heard people disappointed because it appeared that some kind of back room, and again, this is the media now that's sowing seeds of distrust and doubt and trying to rip us up. Some kind of backroom deal that's trumping all of the grassroots activity. If it wasn't for the grassroots activity, nobody would want to talk to anyone in any room, front or back. The only reason that people care and about what we say and want to have a dialogue is because when it's gun day at the legislature, you can be absolute certain that it's gun day at the legislature. There are hundreds of us that show up, that travel long distances, that take days off from work, that disrupt our families and our lives, that spend a ton of money on fuel and meals and everything else, and go to the legislature and explain exactly what we're opposed to and why we're opposed to it. Not with feelings and that kind of foolishness, but with good logic and facts. And we get angry and we put our fists in the air and we make demands because it's something that's very serious. It's because of you. It's because of everybody that shows up there and participates. We have any voice whatsoever. So don't sell yourself short for a second. and pat yourself on the back for being involved in this process, because it hasn't always been like this. And thank God so many people are paying attention and getting involved today. Thank you.
Alex does have a question, which I think that we have answered, but I don't want to ignore his question. He asks simply, do they take your guns for 14 days?
Yeah, I want to talk to that 14-day, and I think probably John will as well. The 14 days in question, there is a court case that said that for a temporary period of time, short period of time, to sort of sort things out, your rights can be taken away. Your firearms can be removed. Who determines what that time period is? I'll tell you who determines that, and that is the Supreme Court. The people that are throwing that 14 days out there, I view that as the shortest period of time in which the individual in question and the courts can make sure that they get it right. The listeners, do you want it to be 6 days? Do you want it to be 3 days? Do you want it to be 14? We tried to come up with a number that would allow that process to be thorough and an individual to receive their due process rights. Yes, their firearms can be taken away temporarily, but they also can be temporarily taken away today if you get into that system. You can be committed to lose your gun rights. This new system allows for that short period of time for your weapons to be removed.
But this is after several layers of interaction. This isn't
Absolutely.
somebody knocking on the door and taking guns. This is the current law in dealing with somebody in crisis and being brought into that system. There's nothing new. There's no new magic 14-day anything. And with the one that we're defeating, there's no notice at all. Hello, my name is Officer Joe, give me your guns. With this one, you can only be brought into the system after an exhaustive participation, with you participating, me participating, to explain that I don't belong in this system. This is sour grapes that somebody started somewhere, and to not even be the important. But people shouldn't lose their firearms for any days. That's what we should strive for. No days whatsoever. Only people legitimately in crisis even get that far in it. But that's after due process. That's after hearings. That's after submitting evidence. That's after.
Let me just address what happens first. Take a look at the statute before this, because it's pretty important. You aren't even a contestant until you are already grabbed by a law enforcement officer because he has probable cause to believe that you have a mental illness that means you're going to be an imminent danger to yourself and others. And that's section 3862. Start by reading that, because until you get picked up by a cop for being really
In crisis.
in crisis is a good shorthand for it, but not just mentally ill, but mentally ill in such a way that people think that you're really going to hurt yourself or somebody else. Okay, it doesn't happen yet. That's current law.
Current.
Then you get taken generally to an emergency room and you're evaluated. Nothing's happened yet. If the cop and the medical practitioner concur, then there's this temporary order that you have to surrender your dangerous weapons, and you have a right to a judicial hearing. It says within 14 days of notice. 14 days is the outside, but generally if I'm representing somebody in that, I'm going to want the full 14 days so I can get the witnesses interviewed, the subpoenas issued, the subpoenas served, talk to the people that have been served, and get everything together that I need for that person to be able to represent themselves at hearing. So yeah, for 14 days, if you aren't spit out when the cop comes to your door and he says, "Geez, you look pretty normal to me," that's a no-go. You aren't even a contestant. He takes you to the emergency room, and the ER doc figures out insulin. Diabetics have a lot of problems if the insulin gets too low or too high. Or you have medication that you need or medication you've taken too much of. If he straightens out your meds and you come right to, you get spit out again. And Also, if they conclude, yeah, you're a problem, but you're not likely to kill yourself or anybody else, then you're also spit out. It's only after you go through all those things that they call it temporary surrender. At that point in time, there would be a temporary surrender of up to 14 days until they get you into a hearing. At the hearing, if it's found that, and actually in the Railender case this happened, the guy got his hearing and the judge looked at him and said, no, you need some treatment, but you're not a danger to yourself or anybody else, and cut him loose. If you win at the hearing, or actually, if, let's say they don't show up, they don't have enough evidence, even if you sit there like a lump, if they don't produce the evidence, you win.
But there's nothing new, right? There's no new anything other than, there is no new, you lose anything for 14 days. There is only a set of guidelines utilizing current law to add more layers of insulation before it gets to that point, more insulation than what we have right now.
And this is much more difficult for anybody to initiate anything against a gun owner. Under the red flag law, essentially anyone can file a petition with the court. There's a list this long of individuals who have the right to do that, including, well, anybody who claims to have ever had any kind of relationship with
Yeah, it's a bad day.
which is not a disprovable statement. You can't prove this person didn't have a relationship.
Right. This is set up.
Anyone could accuse you.
This is set up to protect people from getting to that point, not like the original one that's being cookie cuttered all around the nation.
Under this law, you first have to be able to be put into protective custody by the police. This is something which is quite rare. So right from the get-go, the universe of people who could possibly be affected from this goes from everyone to people who are in mental health crisis right now this moment.
Clear and convincing evidence too, a high bar, not somebody said something. So nothing new.
Got another question from Sean, who asks if there are any standards for how the weapons are going to be stored safely and returned in the same shape. And yeah, actually, there is a section in this bill that does deal with that. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that.
I was just
have it right here.
I can't read well, so.
It's in subsection 7, and it's on the stuff we got, it's page 5, and it's all underlined in small type, so I'm going to squint and look ridiculous. Oh, wow, that's it. I've got this one now. It says, a law enforcement agency shall store any weapons surrendered to or seized by law enforcement under this section for as long as threat-based restrictions are in effect. The duties and liability of a law enforcement agency with respect to handling and storage of a weapon surrendered or seized are governed by Title 25, Section 2804C, subsection 2C. And we've already had some backdrop on this. If you've got relatives or friends that have run into domestic relations kind of protection from abuse or cease harassment stuff, we have been doing this for years. It was kicked around about who do we want to have do this, and Maine had a bad case where a father gave back guns to somebody who then killed somebody. But one of the things that occurred to everybody about law enforcement agencies is they all have an armory. And if they put your guns in their armory, they're going to treat them at least as good as the ones that they have for themselves. So that's subsection 7. They have to be returned to the restricted person when the threat-based restrictions expire. So even if they just expire, you provide the order, and it's the day after the order expires, you get them back. If a seized or surrendered weapon remains unclaimed for 6 months after the expiration, it says you can dispose of it consistent with Title 25, Section 3503A, which provides for auction and a bunch of other stuff for weapons. But one anticipates that you would come and get them sometime before 6 months.
Sean called me earlier with this concern around the storage of the firearms. I will seek out exactly the process that is used now to make sure that the guns are returned in the same condition that they leave or are taken into police custody. There was language that was put in by the committee 2 years ago in the amendment that was passed.
And I believe this is very similar to
It
that.
is very similar to that. There's also going to be some training of law enforcement as to how to store and handle those firearms.
Yep.
That was part of the commitment that was made. It is an issue of serious concern to us. Firearms can be worth a lot of money, and how they're treated can make a difference in their value. We understand that, and we'll make sure that we have all the protections we can get in here.
I believe it's basically Tort Claims Act stuff. The Tort Claims Act governs it, and interestingly, if there's a leak in the roof, there is a public building defect provision in the Tort Claims Act that says that can generate liability.
So if there's nothing else, then I would like
That's about it.
to thank all of you for coming in, for your courage and leading on something as controversial as this. I'd like to thank the people that are out there listening to us. The people that are in this room right now are trying their best to do the best for you and for future gun owners. None of us, I think, like the current environment that's going on out there right now. It does feel like we're constantly under siege as gun owners,
We are.
and we're doing the best that we can to make sure that we keep our rights. And with that, I'd like to thank you and shut this down.
Let's be really clear that I haven't found a single restriction on our rights that isn't already covered in existing law. No compromise whatsoever, no loss of due process, and it actually enhances what we're doing, our rights and our levels of insulation moving forward. This is huge. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for your grassroots activism, because that's how we're going to say we killed every single anti-gun bill in the Maine legislature this year.
And thank you for everybody who tuned in tonight to get some more information on this bill. I know there's been a lot of concern, a lot of curiosity about it. I hope you've gotten the information that you're looking for. I know that perhaps not everybody is going to be convinced, but I hope that in the end, you will like the result. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you very much, folks. And everybody that wants to, always can hit me up on the Gun Owners of Maine page and tell me what they like or don't like about the bill, the process, or me.
Have a good night.